What happened?
He brought in bulldozers and just cut up the runway, and it was still active.
Put X's in the middle of the runways in the middle of the night. So the next day, people woke up and the airport was destroyed. And he said, we're going to make this into a nature park. How many of you have visited what's now called Northerly Island? Okay. Take a bike ride or walk around Northerly Island. It's got a lagoon, it's got hills, it's got shrubbery. You'd have no idea that it was an airport ever. It's been totally transformed, except that there's still a command tower there with a little bit of transformation in the architecture. But, okay, what if that's the description, what's the bigger point? Or what are some bigger points here? This is the son of Daley I. He looked, talked, walked the same as his father. Lots of people writing today for the Sun-Times, the Tribune, on social media still say, this is the machine city, this is an old Irish traditional hierarchy and so forth. And so the explanation of that is it's just power politics. Okay, what else might you see or might you imagine based on what I've just said? You try to apply those 5 theories. How would each of the 5 differently interpret these events? First theory is regimes and leadership, which is what I just said. The toughness, the Irish, the machine, the power of this leader was vaunting his strength and snubbing his nose at because what he did was completely illegal. They could have put him in jail. They could have sent in, the U.S., the National Army, and obviously overpowered, but they did not, state or federal. Second theory is market, competition. Competition for jobs, competition for image, competition for saying, we are innovative in ways that we want to send a message that we're not just doing what the federal government is telling us. We're competing with other locations and saying, we're going to make a nature park. This is a vote for sustainability, the environment, amenities of parks. The third theory of political culture says we want to do this in a way that fits with the tradition of the party and hierarchy, but the content of the policy is not making money. It is not attracting more people. It is building a sustainable city with an aesthetically, environmentally sensitive orientation. And this is a sharp contrast of what we did in the past, so we want to put X's in the old style. In broadcasting, is it innovative? For sure. Finally, does it use the arts? What's the major economic driver there in addition to the tourists who may walk around? There's a massive concert hall, a new concert hall, which is one of the 12 main stages which are all used in Lollapalooza. So Lollapalooza brings in, that is over the summer months, depending on Lollapalooza is the height of it, where you can have 12 actively going. So in 1 week there's something like 120 bands that perform at these 12 different stages. But the point is they're variously filled up based on the size of the band, the amount of the success that they've had in the past, and so forth, in ways that the arts and consumption and culture are matched with an effort to economically plan and politically organize, sharply contrasting with the past of Chicago. So in a sense, these are 5 theories that can be joined, and if we say no one of these is completely right or wrong, each of these can be used to explain that event and to show how it was an explicit, powerful image which so shocked and so confused even a smart USC student who said, I'm studying airports, how could this have happened? Here are 5 answers which are probably partially correct, although we don't need to say that is, the other thing about this kind of framework is you can say, how strong is the whole model? And we have statistical measures like an adjusted R-squared, which says how much variance do these explain in a particular policy, or the change in the value of rent or land value. How much can we explain changes in land value based on this? And the answers in most of social science is how much are we explaining with most social science theories and models? If you look through the journals and you look at the bottom for an adjusted R-squared, if they have that, the basic answer is about 10 or 15%. That is 85% of what we social scientists and people in general want to ask. What causes high rent or low rent? What causes people to go to a city? What causes people to migrate if they're rich or poor, young or old or whatever? 85% is not explained by almost all of these theories. It's not that the theories are worse necessarily than other areas, but that life is complicated. There are lots of individual variables that don't fit the normal predictions, such as daily changing. So if you didn't know that Daly was going to do that, and you said this is an old blue-collar industrial city, they need transportation. I mean, all the books about Chicago for 100 years, I'll broadcast as well. Chicago is the most studied city in the world. You are in the best place in the world to study cities in general and to build on the research which has been done here. I and many others came to Chicago for this reason, because we have the smartest, best geographers, economists, sociologists, others and so forth working on cities. And that base is something which now people know about or follow, whether you're in China or Norway. People read about studies of Chicago. And in that way, we are oftentimes ahead of what people are thinking about. I mean, I went to Norway, I talked to people for 10 years, I say, class politics is important in Norway, but you've got more than class politics in Norway. So no, you're talking an American theory. Norway, we have class politics, that's all you need to know. Okay, so 10 years later they say, all right, we've got some non-class politics. How does this fit with your readings on airports?
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to be an economic city, and a convention center is right
Wait,
there.
stop. It's supposed to be an economic city. Who says?
Well, it's right next to the convention center, so it makes sense that they would keep it there.
How much revenue is the new concert hall generating?
I have no idea.
Probably more than the airport ever did. If you want to ask in those dollar and cents terms. A book we have as well on the reading list is called The City is an Entertainment Machine. Entertainment is, a big multi-billion-dollar business. LA, whole city of LA has been built on that for the 20th century. Film industry. They're not the normal widgets. There may be films, there may be videos, there may be people buying tickets. It's money that's just the whole Southern European economy is based on what? What's the biggest industry in Greece, France, Spain, Italy? Tourism. Yes.
And I feel like that also makes sense, like this whole more economic, like how it's a really smart economic decision because of this whole, like I feel like it fits, like the consumerism theory is what struck me more, because also Daley Jr. was the one to get rid of the train yards and establish Millennium Park, right? So he probably had this whole strategic vision of that whole little area of East Loop to create this sort of entertainment section.
Absolutely. I had a visitor, or two visitors come to my class in 1994 and in 1995. 1994, and they're the top two people in a civic group and in the city of tourism and global affairs. And I said at the end, I asked, how much does the mayor follow what you say, Mayor Daley too? He said, oh yes, he's interested. They came the next year and I said, how much does the mayor listen to what you say? He said, we say one thing and he does 12 things. So he got the message in 1994-95. He wasn't born that way. He wasn't raised with flowers or music. He was raised around a traditional ethnic machine politics neighborhood, Bridgeport. He learned it on the job. He traveled with smart people. He listened to his wife. He listened to the people in cultural affairs. He started going to Davos in Switzerland, and he had battles with the traditional party people. But the point is, these were dramatic new policies, and showing and which still are that is, if you go around and talk to different people in different neighborhoods, you get very different stories, and they're true. That is, they're partially true in the sense that we've got many different things going on, which is why this is controversial and interesting, as you can hear even in these two somewhat skeptical questions you've heard. So someone else try something out. How about a non-Chicago? Who's where you say where are you from?
Me? I'm from Urbana, Illinois.
Where?
Urbana.
Urbana. Okay. How might this fit or not fit in Urbana?
Like the idea of a city?
Yeah.
Um,
Or entertainment, the rise of entertainment and the arts.
Well, I mean, Urbana-Champaign, it's a college town, essentially. It kind of developed because the railroad went through there, but then with the land grant, I think it became like the U of I. And I mean, now that's like the main draw for anyone to come to the town, Urbana-Champaign. And I think that you see like a lot of international.
How much do people come from the surrounding area to concerts, to sports events, football?
I think football is a huge draw. I don't know about concerts, but you definitely hear like from smaller towns, people come to shop in Champaign-Urbana as the big town that they come to like, yeah, consume, I guess. There's a mall.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a student working with me now who's a former conductor of Beethoven, as well as of Texas high school marching bands. And we're getting stuff on the small towns in Texas, and now the high school marching bands, the football games, the 4th of July events, these are big things in many smaller towns. And so there are small town variations of what we're talking about with mixed field. Plus, of course, you can have great mountain biking in, outside Santa Fe. That is, mountain biking, the amenities of the mountains, of the desert, of the views, of the weather, the gorgeous weather in that immediate area. These are all things that have aesthetic concern, but the economists have been talking about this for 20 years as having economic value and trying to measure it in a systematic way. We build on them, but they basically look at one amenity like the desert or January temperature. What we do is to take 400 or so of these, put them all together and say a scene includes all of these things. And then we weight them and we build these more abstract conceptions like transgression, glamour, utilitarianism, and show how they combine and build new foundations for different kinds of things. So in that sense, there's an economic, that is a materialistic, in that sense, a market economic meaning, but the economic theory is of amenities we have built on and transformed to incorporate more explicitly the aesthetic elements of the arts, which are critical in literature, music, painting, movies. And why are we doing this? I've done this is all new to me in the last 10 years. I didn't do this before. I'm doing it because mayors are doing it, because cities are doing it. I'm using Chicago as a concrete example. But this happened far before Chicago at places like southern France. Aix, Avignon had massive The Austrians have Beethoven, Mozart festivals. The Southern Italians, most cities in Italy, big and small, will have little wine festivals, have little cheese festivals, arugula festivals. Their specialty that they grow or they build or they make, ceramics, whatever, they'll have a festival around that. These have been here for a long time, but they're now being turned into big business in places like Chicago. Yeah.
I'm from Tampa, Florida, and there's this man in Tampa named Jeff Winnick who's investing a lot of money in the downtown in order to create, like, it definitely, what he's doing is definitely fits in with the consumption in the arts, because he's like, he built this new park and he's funding these different events that are bringing people into the city. But I was wondering how that fits into like the regimes and leadership, like theories especially, because he's not in the government. Obviously the mayor is like allowing him to invest money in the city, but he's just, I don't know what he did before, but he's just an investor. And so I was wondering how like that might relate.
Well, if he's that salient and you're talking about it, and he's presumably been in the press and so forth, it's not a secret. I mean, in the old Chicago style, you'd have Chicago developers who'd go to LA and they'd show up in the city hall and they'd open a briefcase and say, what do I have to pay to get this done? Close that briefcase. You know, this is not Chicago. So there are different ways that you can do things. So having a sense of the local culture of what's legitimate and important in Tampa before he was there, and then seeing how he has worked to work with those leaders, we need, that is, I don't know, is a quick answer, but my general point is, look at him in the context of Tampa's history and cultural and cultural past. But then also think, let's try to understand Tampa. Part of it's unique, but a lot of it is probably shared. Reform versus machine, etc. Other examples or questions? Yeah.
I have a question relating to the 5 theories. So what do you think of the relationship between them? I mean, are they kind of in parallel, kind of the fundamental theories where you can put them into every kind of city, or they're actually the storyline kind of is based on the level of development of the city or certain place, then certain theory can be applied to there?
I'd say that the simple answer is not to say we have 2 theories, one for the rich people and one for the poor people. And many people in less developed countries, Africa, poor countries, will say, Western theories don't work. I mean, we are different here. I would say, and I would challenge that. I would say, let's put the theories with their arrows there, and then try to test the competing theories in an African city, in a Chinese city, in London, in Paris, or in the French cities, comparing these with each other, and then see how much they change. So rather than assuming that underdevelopment is the driver, let's test it. That is, how much difference does economic development make to the relative importance of factor 1, or say, the arts, for instance? Or we had a MAPS MA done a year or 2 ago, where we looked at economic growth in jobs and aspects of population growth, and so we have theories like that. We then tested these in 5 different groups of U.S. cities, from the most affluent, and then we started certain with income, the highest, the richest quintile on down to the poorest quintile. And the one question was, how important are the arts or arts jobs in driving other jobs, total jobs, if you also control income, education, occupation, ethnicity, crime rates, a bunch of other things? Do the arts matter? Do they add value above and beyond these other things? And the bottom line is yes. In all quintiles of the U.S. cities, arts had a significant impact, although the particular patterns and combinations of variables mattered. So in my Bronzeville neighborhood, I'm sitting on a committee now. I'm going to a meeting right after this tonight. We're having a meeting of the group that's dealing with the Michael Reese Hospital site, which is right next to McCormick Place. It's just south of McCormick Place. And so it's a large vacant land area, and now it's a candidate for Amazon. Should the Amazon headquarters be there? And many of the people on our committee are saying we want to preserve the history and culture of Bronzeville. We're not so necessarily interested in Amazon if they're not interested in the history and culture of Bronzeville. So we'll see what happens tonight. Yes, this is private, so I shouldn't be telling you anything, but shh, yeah, don't repeat it. Yeah.
Maybe you can't speak to this, but I was wondering about the program too in Bronzeville, where isn't there a program in Bronzeville where they're allowing people to rent out buildings for $1 as long as it's going toward a community project, and how can we theorize that and begin to talk about it?
No, indeed, there are all kinds of innovative projects that are going on in different neighborhoods of Chicago, and that is to try to renovate and to build up. That is, but I would say rather than saying, but in part of answering a question like that, the same kind of question is asked. How about that is, we used to have high-rise public housing. Those were all torn down by Daley 2. They're replaced by what's called mixed income housing, where you have the people who are eligible for public housing, the poorest, middle-level people who are low and moderate income, and then market rate people who are there if they pay any price that is charged. So you've got three kinds of people living in the same housing. Okay, so the question is often asked again, are these working? And the question is, how do you define, that is, to answer that, you need to bring in things like what is attracting the people to want to live there, or to that is, why does the alderman want to approve it? Why do you have developers who want to do this? Why are people renting out their homes and so forth? You need to know what's the attraction. And so the argument in part is the culture and history of Bronzeville is a major driver bringing people who say, I want to live here. Almost everybody's black except for me. I go to the meetings, I'm usually the only white person in the meetings. But the point is the African American culture and history is a major amenity. Bronzeville and Harlem have this in ways that no place else in the U.S. does. These are major cultural dynamics which are culturally critical in ways that the people in the Bronzeville Heritage and Tourism Association have been championing for years. But the point is, this is now recognized in City Hall. And similarly, we have Polish neighborhoods, we have Italian neighborhoods. So we have the classic ethnic background. But then we have new neighborhoods which are not ethnic, which are based on lifestyle, gays, artists, and these kinds of neighborhoods can follow. So there was a battle, for instance, when Daley 2 said, let's put up statues in these different neighborhoods. So in Greektown, we'll put up a classic, ancient Greek kind of statue. Chinatown, you get something Chinese. Went to the gay neighborhood and said, we want to put up some rainbow stuff here. What did the people in the neighborhood say? We don't want it. We're not an ethnic group. We don't want to be treated like an ethnic group. We want to be treated as individuals. What did Daley and the people do? Said, tough, we're putting it in anyway. And so the grandmothers and the mothers of some of these gays said, I didn't know you were living in a rainbow neighborhood. What are you doing here? I thought you were my good son. Okay, so that led to conflicts that the Daley style of treating, of using the classic ethnic model didn't work when you apply it to some of these new social movements. That's right. But it illustrates the competing dynamics going on in the same neighborhood of battling between different perspectives. Hand was up, yes.
I was just saying, your meeting about Amazon moving into Bronzeville, wouldn't, irregardless of whether or not Amazon would want to cooperate with Bronzeville in any way, wouldn't it like irrevocably change Bronzeville anyways if they came in?
That's why many people say it's too big and too strong for us to deal with. Others have said, how about the State Street corridor, which is where the high-rise low-income housing was? Which some of the critics say the Daley One built to keep the blacks out of his neighborhood of Bronzeville. That is, that building is right next to the Dan Ryan Expressway. So the expressway was supposed to be the wall, but it didn't last very long. But, so, all these are interpenetrating. Who else? Yes?
Quick question. So, because entertainment is so important to a city, what's the price of entertainment? Because I know many cities have refused to build new stadiums for their teams, and their teams have left. And then other cities build stadiums, and they're not full, or the team is clearly not going to move. Like the Yankees are not going to move anywhere. So, what's the cost of that?
It's a very hot issue, and there's a whole literature on it. There are probably 20 books on trying to evaluate the dollar added by the sports stadiums. Mark Rosentraub, University of Michigan, has a synthesis of a lot of this research, and he looks at different neighborhoods, different cities, and pulls a lot of it together. I'd say the biggest problem of most of the research is that it tends to be very local and specific. So you go around the White Sox and the Cubs area and you look at those shops and say, these shops within half a mile have benefited. We got more bars, and this is growth. What does that leave out? Okay, who's from China? A couple of people from China. All right. There was a Chinese basketball player maybe 15 years ago. Huge guy, very successful in China. He was hired and came to the U.S. The first game he played was watched on television in China by more people than the entire U.S. population. Does that have implications for advertising revenue that go beyond the immediate neighborhood in the Cubs area? It's called what the economists called externalities. I mean, they're externalities if they're not explicitly in the contract, but the point is, if that number of Chinese viewers are watching this basketball game, that in turn leads to potential increase in advertising revenue, and how much is that factored into the new stadium for basketball or football or baseball? Most of the economy or the earlier cost-benefit analyses leave those things out because they're hard. They're just too hard. But my point is, in an increasingly global world, and so I'm using the China example as a far geographically more distant. But in Detroit, I mean, you have massive numbers of people who drive in from the suburbs who go to the sports games. They don't live in that immediate neighborhood, but they're there, and that makes Detroit different from a small town in the middle of a place where you don't have the sports teams. The music groups who go to Detroit have regularly said Detroit has got the best music audience in the entire U.S. That's the opposite of the police crime story. Okay. So local cultures matter. We're at the end of the hour. I have to go to a meeting in 10 minutes, but I'll have office hours for a short, in general, every Monday. Okay.
I wanted to say too that I will have office hours every Monday from 2:30 to 4:30, so right before class, and that'll be over in the Divinity School's coffee shop. Okay?
Thank you.
Is the campus like 5 years?
Yes, yes.